And when you think of going in the Navy at 17, we were young, but I look back and I think I was pretty mature in a lot of ways. And we had about I would say maybe a quarter of the ship's crew were teenagers, and the guys in their 20s, we called them the old men, you know.
Yep. Yes. From what I've read, World War II with the Navy, if you could have ice cream on your ship, that was a big deal. Did your ship actually, was it big enough to have ice cream?
I'll tell you what, while we're talking about my brother, I wasn't going to tell that story, but I will now since you asked. We had ice cream mix, but we did not. I don't know. Talk about crazy things. We had an ice cream mix, but no ice cream machine. Now, isn't that crazy that they would stock our ship with that?
Yes.
So we were on there, and he said to me, Ralph, this is an Army reefer that I'm on, and he said, if you can get me some ice cream mix, I'll bring over some ice cream. So he did. They got in the boat and went back to his ship. He did. I couldn't get off. We were in dry dock. And that he came back and he had these tubs of ice cream. And that evening we had ice cream because we never had ice cream. And let me tell you a little story too, that, you know, the USS New Jersey, I saw the New Jersey and the Iowa. They're the only two battleships I saw out there. And I a couple of times went to church on the church services on the New Jersey, and never was on the Iowa. But we traveled sometimes with the New Jersey. And we were in harbor there one time, and they passed the word that they're having 3 Liberty parties, and if you're now Section 1, lay up to the quarterdeck to go to the New Jersey for Liberty. Can you imagine pulling Liberty on a battleship? They had what they called a gidunk stand. It was a big room. And a couple of years ago, I was on the New Jersey, and I kind of looked around trying to find that room, but I couldn't make it out and didn't have access to all the ship. But it was a big room, and what we called a gidunk stand, ice cream. You know, they gave each section of our ship 2 hours to be in there to have ice cream and all the goodies. And then you went back to the ship and another section came. So all 3 sections, quite a treat just to get ice cream. This is something we didn't have. We had powdered milk, powdered eggs, you know, and that kind of thing, but never ice cream.
Okay. Well, I trust you were welcomed as a hero when your brother brought back those tubs of ice cream.
Oh, I tell you, yeah, I was pretty popular that day. The guys were thrilled, you know, to get ice cream because it was hot out there, you know, and boy, get that ice cream. Oh man, that's wonderful. But we had ice cream mix, but no ice cream maker.
Hey,
Now the officers might have, I don't know, but we didn't.
I supported the military for 27 years, so the fact you had all the ingredients and no machine seems normal to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's see. Did we get oh, you had another question there. With all the campaigns you were in, was your ship directly involved in transporting Marines to the islands, or were you just
we escorted the ship.
Okay.
That's our duty. We escorted all kinds of ships, and a lot of oilers. Majority of it was oil and refueling the fleet, but then we did escort other ships. And on the Iwo Jima landing, we went back to Pearl Harbor, and got them, got the
Right.
27th, they got the 4th and 5th Marine Division and escorted them a lot of transports and escorted them all the way back to Iwo Jima for that landing. And then we
Okay.
were up, right up on the beach, in a foot of water below our bow.
Oh my.
Yeah, we were close.
Yeah.
At a reunion in 1995, I asked the guy who was second in command what his scariest moment was during the war. Bill Mitchell was his name. He was a lieutenant, uh, first lieutenant, I think. He said, well, Ralph, you might think it was Okinawa with the kamikazes. He said that was scary, but he said, when we went into Iwo Jima to take the Marines in, he said, I had command of the wheel, and we were told their orders were to go in as close as possible and hold position. And so I had a foot of water beneath the bow.
Oh.
So afraid that we'd run it aground. He said if I had run it aground, gotten stuck, then I would have been court-martialed. He said that's the way the Navy works. They're very unforgiving.
Okay. Okay. So this is a question I was told to ask. So when you were a kid, did you know a Civil War veteran?
Oh yes, I knew a little man. He wasn't much taller than me. I would, when the creek was, I could go down across the creek to school. That was a shortcut. Or if the creek was up, I had to take the dirt road around and go past his house. And he had a couple of horses. And so I got friendly with a nice little old guy. And we used to have sometimes have meals outside, where we have corn on the cob and that kind of thing, and watermelon, and make ice cream, so forth. But he would tell us stories about the Civil War. And I only remember one. He was a drummer boy. He told me he was 12 years old and he was in battle. And he said that he told about the guys being wounded. And he said they would put a stick, give him a shot of booze and put a stick in his mouth, piece of wood in his mouth. And then he said, we would hold him down while they sawed off his leg.
Mm,
And he said, I'm in my 80s now. And at night, I wake up sometime hearing those men scream. He
wow.
said it was blood curdling screams. They'd saw off an arm, no anesthesia, no nothing. Oh, that's one story that really stuck with me. And then one time, when I was still before my mother married, I was in an orphan's home, and I was up in northern Illinois, and it was a Memorial Day parade, and this big open touring car came by, and there were three guys in blue uniforms, gray-haired guys in uniform, sitting in the back seat, and on the side of the car was a draped a banner that said GAR. And so I said to somebody, I was about 9 years old. I said, "What is a GAR?" Somebody called out, "That's the Grand Army of the Republic. Those are Union soldiers." So I laid eyes on Union soldiers and knew this little guy who was a drummer boy in the Civil War.
Mm.
And another story you might not believe, or you may, because I'm pretty old. My grandfather fought in the Civil War.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I could show you his certificate. Let me run and get it real quick. I think
Okay.
I did quite a search because we knew that our grandfather was in the Civil War, but I didn't know much about it. And so I Marilyn and I took trips and went to different battlefields. Went to Gettysburg. Can you see that?
Yeah. Okay. Certificate of Union Service, Rufus D. Whitlock of the 49th Infantry Company K, Illinois, United States of America, 1861 to 1865. Oh, he was in there the whole time.
He was, yeah. He was went in when he was 20, I think.
Okay.
So anyway, and he obviously lived.
Obviously, yeah.
My dad was his only child, as far as I know. I've heard that he had a daughter, but I had never proved that. And I visited his grave in southern Illinois and the graves of those who died in the flu epidemic. And his wife died in 1938. And I think I went to, in fact, I know I went to her funeral, but didn't understand who she was really, except that she was his grandmother. And as the years go by, then you realize she was his widow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should maybe take one of those DNA tests. If there was a sister, you might get that picked up on automatically.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
So, are there things that a lot of people do not understand about World War II?
I think some of the things they're probably right now beginning to understand a little bit. There was everything was rationed. You had ration tickets, A, B, C on gas. Tires were rationed, and you had to be pretty high priority, like a farmer or somebody like that, to get tires. Um, when we went home on leave, we were issued meat, and certain things were like meat was rationed, and I forget what else. But we had these food certificates that used, so when you went home, you had it, and also gas ration tickets. I think they gave us probably an A. A was the least. It was 3 or 4 gallons a week.
Okay.
And then B and then C was the largest group. Of course, farmers, they bought their gas in bulk generally and had their own pump on the farm. Uh,
So, are there things that a lot of people don't understand about the Korean War?
well, the Korean War is kind of the forgotten war. Um, People weren't against it, not like the Vietnam War, although we lost how many, 40,000 guys in the Korean War. But it was 1950 to 52 was when I was in it. I went in the fall of 52 and got out, and toward the end of August, I still had 2 years to go on my reserve time, but I was released from active duty. So I was in it 2 years, and then it went on till 53, and they had, in fact, it's never ended. They had those so-called peace talk. It was just a termination of hostilities. That's all it was. And that a war has never officially ended.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Nobody ever said the war ended. It's just
Yeah,
no armed conflict at the moment.
right. Yeah.
What ship did you serve on during Korea?
Korea, I served on the USS Floyd B. Parks, DD 884. That was
Okay.
one of the had the big twin mount, and we did a lot of bombardment in Korea. I
Okay.
actually got shot at more in Korean War than I did in World War II. There were no air attacks on us and no submarine attacks, but there was we dueled with the shore batteries quite a bit.
Mm.
Tried to take them out, but they were in the hill, and there was a big what they call it, a big peninsula there called Calmagak, and they would fire at us from that, and then we'd call in the air, we'd go in and blast away, and they'd call in, they'd have that whole thing burning with napalm, and 2 hours later, the guns were back in the caves, and they'd come back out and fire at us. And
Mm.
there were days when they didn't fire at all, but you never knew when they would, you know. But we did a lot of what we called interdictory fire because Wonsan Harbor Wonsan was a big transportation center, and that's where years later they caught the USS Pueblo, you know, an intelligence
Oh,
ship.
yes.
Remember they took those guys captive? Well, that was Wonsan, and that's where I spent most all my time in the Korean War. It was a big rail hub and big truck. The trucks used to come down along, and the trains also. They had to come down along the coast because it was very mountainous, hilly. And so when they came through, we would really go in and 2 or 3 destroyers. We'd go in and just blast for all we were worth, you know. And sometimes they'd blast for all they were worth. So we expended a lot of ammunition, and you know, I never told Marilyn. I never ever told her that I was in combat in World War in Korea. We just were in Korea, you know, in North Korea, but I just didn't talk about it to her.
Yeah, there's nothing she could have done,
Yeah,
and it would
yeah,
have been hard for her to hear.
yeah. We'd go over and stay about 8 months and then go back to San Diego. She'd come out and stay there. Some pretty interesting stories that we had.
So, okay, so how many tours over did you take then?
I actually did 2, but the last one was short. I only we usually go for 8 months, and the second one I went back and it was about 3 months, and then I got released. That's quite a story too. A lot of things happened. Um, I was only third class, but because they were releasing all these people that had been extended, and I became the third class. I was the top rated electrician aboard ship, and I had all the responsibility of it. And yeah, it was quite a story. Uh, I had lieutenant. Well, I won't tell you that story now. I'll tell you that privately. There's a lot of stories that I have. I officer tried to Shanghai me to get me court-martialed so he would so I'd stay on the ship because he
Yike.
needed a man. That
You'd
was
like to think impressment went out after the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, but not
yeah.
quite.
Well, I think I mentioned to you, didn't I, that when I was in the Korean War, that one of the fellows got permission for us to have church services, and he told me, I said, "Boy, that's great." His name was Jack. We called him Happy Jack, and he said, "Yeah, I got permission to on Sundays to have church services." And so I said, "That's great." Yeah, and he said, and I told him, "You're the preacher."
Surprise!
So the captain and the executive officer always attended, and I just I wasn't a preacher, but I just opened the word and explained it, you know, the best I could.
Hey, when your source material is perfect,
Yeah.
that's a really good start.
And at this last year, when I went to the reunion, there were 2 guys from the Korean War, and both of them had attended those services.
Ah,
One guy said to me, he says, "You're the guy who led the church services." Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So then I had one thing on World War II. Ed raised a question I forgot to follow up on. So you mentioned that the Halloran was very effective against submarines.
Yes.
So what is that? Could you amplify on that?
Yes, we had depth charges. We called them ash cans that we rolled off the back, and we had depth charges that. And my anti-submarine warfare station was what they called a K gun, but it was had an arbor that fit in a tube, kind of like a mortar, and it fit down in the tube, and then there was a yoke on here, and they had a big depth charge that we put on. It took two guys to lift it on, put it on, and buckle it down, strap it, and then you'd pull the lanyard and it would fire out. So we could fire a pattern this way. We could roll them off the back. And then we had what we called hedgehogs, which at the time was supposedly a secret weapon. It had in the front of the ship, and it had 24 rocket type, um, about 3 foot, maybe 3 foot long rocket types. And there are 24 of them. And they could fire a pattern. And then the beautiful thing about them was that they'd only explode if they hit something.
Oh, okay.
That way they didn't destroy the pattern, the sound pattern. And did I tell you about the guy that committed suicide?
No.
I didn't tell you that. We were in a harbor. We were in Ulithi. We had been out with tankers and came in. Ulithi is a big, it's a tall. All the islands there are just flat. They're just barely. They might be 2 feet above sea level. But it was a large area and big anchorage, and they had all these battleships and cruisers and carriers, and the whole thing would be in there. And we had come in from a run, and when you go in, then they close the sub gates, submarine nets. They closed them behind you. So we were in there, and one morning we got general quarter call, bong, bong, bong. All hands man your battle stations. It's not a drill, not a drill. I got topside, and I saw this tanker. It was USS Mississauga, and it had been submarine had torpedoed it.
Mm.
And what happened, I believe to this day that there were two subs that were in. But anyway, all the ships were anchored, and the destroyers and DEs got underway. And we went up right near a cruiser. I think it was the Savannah, if I'm not mistaken. But my battle station for ASW was that K gun, and I couldn't fire my K gun because we were right up about 30, 40 feet away from um, a heavy cruiser, which was anchored there, and all the guys are standing up watching it. Um, and anyway, we rolled off depth charges off the back, and set up a big geyser. After the war, I ran into a guy who had a picture, and he was on that ship, and it was in his ship's ship's photo book that they had, and it showed our ship with that big spout of water behind it. But anyway, we got a bunch of rubble came up, and then two guys came up. They were in the water, and so it's probably standing about 6 feet off the water. The rear end of our ship is about 6 feet. It's not very high. So we're standing there, and we saw this guy, and one of the guys uh, had a life ring, about yay big, about a little over 18 inches. It was a small one. And he yelled to the guy, "Hey!" And he threw it to him, and it landed right by him. And one of my most vivid memories is of that young guy looking up at us, and then he put his hands on his head and pulled his head under the water. And we just couldn't believe it, you know. That was
Mm.
my first experience with that. And so anyway, then the other guy was in the water, so he was pretty close to the ship, and we were going to we put a pole down toward him to rescue him, so he could grab it. And about that time, our ship was drifting, and they backed it up. And when they did, they got the swirl, you know, and he
Oh, yes.
stuck them right into the screws. And that's the last
Mm.
I saw of him.
So you had mentioned the two guys who must have been on the sub.
Yeah, they were a sub. It was a two-man midget sub.
Okay.
After the war, I found out many years later, in fact, probably 10 years ago, I saw a History Channel thing, and I saw that they had subs with clippers on the front of them where they could clip those gates.
Oh,
They were
okay.
pretty ingenious. They got through.
That's how they got in.
Yeah,
Okay.
they got through. Yeah.
Yeah. You said you were before things went wonky. You were saying something about talking to some officer in '95 about what had
Oh,
happened there.
yeah, that was the same guy, the executive officer, number two in charge, and asked him why we didn't get credit for that sub. And he said, well, he said, Ralph, you and I know that we got that sub, but he said the official Navy records uh, went with our USS Rawl. They carried the flag for the division, and they had dropped charges out in the bay, out in the channel, because we were working together. So some of them have us as an assist, that we did an assist.
Ah, I
Well,
see.
we sounded on that sub and right there and next to that cruiser. We dropped our charges and brought up a lot of junk, and then two guys, I think we sunk this up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little hard to see how the guys on the other end of the bay blasted them over to your side of the
Yeah,
bay.
yeah.
Okay.
They were out in the channel, you know. So anyway, so that's the way it is.
How many subs did you get credit for over the course of the war? Did they have?
Well, we didn't. That was the only one. Although
Okay.
we dropped charges several times, but I don't know if we ever got. A lot of times we'd drop charges and we'd see whales flopping, flip flopping,
Hmm.
because they would sound. You know, sometimes we get false readings. So we did drop charges every now and then when we were out on convoy. You know,
Right.
but
Yeah.
we did a lot of convoy work.
But a lot of times you don't know unless you get wreckage coming to the surface. So
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. Then I had a couple of questions about just your life as a whole. So one is, are there some life lessons that you'd like other people to benefit from?
Yeah, I think probably the one thing that I've learned in life, and that is that a lot of times, even after I got out of the Navy, that would happen. I'd kind of be drifting on yesterday's experience, you know, spiritually, or I can remember I'd go to church and I'd be really busy and everything. And all week long, I wouldn't really get into the word, you know, and I'd get kind of cold, you know, and go to church on Sunday, that kind of thing, and get refreshed. And finally, because I had done a lot of scripture memorizing during the war, but you know, life gets pretty busy sometimes. And so I just made a vow. I said, you know, I've got to get into the word every day. And so I made a vow that, you know, like when I worked at O'Hare Field, I I'd go in 45 minutes early so I could get into the word before I went to work, you know. and sometimes we worked long hours, that kind of thing. And I, to this day, I try to make sure that no matter how tired I am or what, I get into the Word, read the Word every day, get the Word, and have a time of prayer with the Lord, because otherwise you tend to drift and you get cold, spiritually. And it happens so easy. It sneaks up on you. It's like old age, it just kind of sneaks up on you. So that's the thing to, and another thing that I've done. Oh, okay. Thank you, Jacob. Uh, um, Another thing that I've done is uh, he distracted me. As far as another thing I've done is say, "Oh, God bless me. Oh, God bless me." And I kind of learned from Bob Cook years ago. He says, "Don't be asking for blessings." He said, "Be a blessing. Ask God
Mm.
to make you a blessing." And so that's kind of been my prayer. Lord, make me a blessing, because when you do that, I'm blessed. I don't have to go looking for a blessing, you know. Um, but that's one little thing I picked up, because get into the Word every day, because life goes on. You get busy with other things, and we get, the old nature tends to want to rule. Never considered my, and that's another thing too. Over the years, I would think, boy, I'm not much of a Christian, and I'd look up to somebody. And I remember one time I was going on a mission trip with a guy, and boy, I just thought he was a super Christian. And within a month or so, I found out that he was really, he was cheating on his wife, and he had to stand up and apologize, and they let him go from his position. And, I thought, don't look to people, because the arm of flesh will fail you. That's what the word says. The arm of flesh will fail you. And I add to that, yeah, even my own will fail, because, you know, it's like you said the other day, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and I love to be in fellowship with the Lord's people and be a blessing if you can. And another thing is, I hear people complaining about their gender, or complaining about their color, or I just say, be what God made you and develop the talents He gave you as much as you can. Keep trying to improve, and you'll be blessed and you'll be happy.